Good morning, good morning, good morning. Kevin, how's the sound? Kevin? Kevin, the sound is good?
Sounds good, Rabbi. Yes.
Okay,
You sound good, Rabbi.
All right, give me a second. Let me put my brain together. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachos Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph. In the Ois V'Hader's edition, we are going to be learning today Daf Ayin Aleph, beginning on Daf Ayin Amid Beis, by a Mishnah, 3 lines in the bottom of the Amid. We gave at the end of last class a few words of introduction for the new Perek. Kedai to go back and to listen to it for those who are learning online. Right now, to give one final brief introduction, which is something that we mentioned in passing at the end of last class, and that is that in as much as we have a machloikes rishonim, whether if a person or people, God forbid, ate non-kosher food, whether they're chayiv to bench birchas hamazon or not, nevertheless, lokula alma, according to all opinions, zimun, which is the topic of this chapter, is something that one may not do, cannot do, if the food was non-kosher. Firstly, we will view that as a mitzvah haba'a ba'aveda, and I know that logic should also affect, and that's the reason why many hold that you're not even allowed to bench, Keshitas Harambam, etc. But even according to the Ravid and others who hold that if a person ate non-kosher, you do have to bench, zimun. Zimun is something that can only be done if you have a minimum of 3 people that ate together, let's use the words of Chazal, bikvius, in a fixed manner. If they happen to be in the same location, but there was no togetherness when they ate their meal, then there is no obligation to do zimun. And it's amazing, the concept that when people eat non-kosher, that in itself makes it that there is no togetherness. There's no togetherness. There's a beautiful Hayom Yom in which we record the Hasidic saying that when 2 Jews get together, it's 2 godly souls against 1 animal soul. And the question is, why do we say that? Just like 2 people, each one has a nefesh alikiz, every yid also has a nefesh habahamis. The answer is that my nefesh habahamis only cares about me. It's not focused on you. It's selfish. My nefesh alikiz not only wants me to do the right thing, it also wants you to do the right thing. In other words, there's a certain type of togetherness that is only affected when the godly part of us are in action, is aroused. Masha Enkin, when people eat a davar ha'asur, and that's a good intro to this Mishnah, because what this Mishnah will do is it's going to enumerate many different types of foods that you'll see each one has a chiddush. You might have thought that eating it is asur, and if that would be the case, then there would be no zimun. And yet the Mishnah writes that you are chayiv to make a zimun, and every single case will be explained. We'll explain what the chiddush is, what the reason is why indeed you do need to make a zimun, and then the Mishnah will then enumerate, just for the sake of symmetry or of contrast, some other types of foods that are almost like the first ones mentioned in the Mishnah, but they indeed will already be considered on the other side. It's food that may not be eaten, and therefore there will not be the obligation to make zimun. We will also learn, according to one opinion in the Gemara, that if 3 people only had da'as to eat together, that in itself that in itself will be mechayiv them to make zimun. Very similar to a topic that we learned in the previous chapter about how da'as has the koyach to be makashiv, to connect. That's another beautiful theme that we see in Hasidus. We're going to have a question whether the obligation of, even though clear, the chiyuv of zimun is only if you have 3 people. Question will be, what happens if there are 2 people that ate together? Even though they're certainly not mechuyev, are they allowed to make zimun or not? We're going to have a very similar question when it comes to Sanhedrin, as we will learn. We'll learn again that you have a Beis Din is a minimum of 3. Question is, if there was a Beis Din only of 2 dayanim, and they did make a decision, is that decision halachically considered to be a valid decision? We're going to correlate the question of 2 for zimun and 2 for a Beis Din. We're going to have some interesting halachas of what needs to be done when we had, and God willing, imminently, we're going to have again the mechatos, and we're going to use that as the medium through which people who are tamei meis will become tahar. So you have the dipping of the bundles of ezoiv in the mechatos, the tefillah, and then you have the hazoya, this actual sprinkling that is done with a bundle of ezoiv. We're going to have a very, very interesting correlation between the 3 bundles there and the 3 over here. We're going to have many halachas in this daf. Without any further ado, chavra, daf ayin on the base. Let's go again, just to read again the opening part of the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah that shloisha sha'achlu ka'achas, and the ka'achas is the main chiddush over here. Not only physically ka'achas, but as halachically we will define the ka'achas. And last year we went through the charedim, which is really the Rav Bartanura, Rabbeinu Avadia, and we learned the machlekes between Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rosh va'ayin b'fnim. We're not going to review that. We're going to go weiter. But if there's a ka'achas, 3 is machayev zimun. We're going to learn later that there is another step, upgraded step in zimun, as we know, from practice, that if you have 10 or more, then the zimun becomes one in which we even evoke God Almighty's holy name. But from 3 on, right, there is that statement pre-benching, nevarech sha'achalnu mishaloi, nevarech we, it's taka we, because there's a togetherness, right? Chayav and lezamin. And like we mentioned, if the food is not allowed to be eaten, there will never be a chiyuv lezimun, either mitzvah haba ba'aveda, or because that in itself, the fact that it's not kosher, that takes away the kvius. And now look at every single case of the Mishnah, how every case is a chiddush. You might have thought they ate something that's prohibited. Komash malan, it's permissible enough, and therefore the chiyuv of zimun will be in effect. Number 1 is achal damai. What is damai? Guys, you can keep a finger in the charedim. So we know that the produce of an amaretz is called de mai. What is this? In other words, we are choshit that even though that the majority of amaratzim, even in the times of the Second Temple, did take off trumas u'maisvis properly, but there was a substantial minority that did not. Normally, we followed the majority. The Chazal at the times of the second Beis Hamikdash were machmir by saying that some of the tithes, not all of them, we have to rabbinically be suspect that it was not properly removed, and therefore you may not eat the mai prior to taking off whatever those parts of the maisvis are. So you would think that if someone or 3 people ate the mai, they violated rabbinic law, they should not be mechayiv to bench. So Kamash Malon our Mishnah that you are chayiv to bench. The Charedim writes, according to Bartanura, the first line under the Gemara. Why? Because at the end of the day, Roiv of the Amaratzim did give off all of the Trumas U'Maisros. So even though L'chadchil, of course, you're not allowed to eat it, and eating it is in violation, but you can't say that they ate something that's not kosher. Interestingly, the Gemara in Bavli says the reason why the Mishnah says that if they ate the mai, they're chayiv to do zimun, because the mai was not prohibited on everyone. There are 2 groups of people that l'chadchila can eat the mai, and one of them are aniyim. The other are soldiers at war. Obviously, soldiers at war, mamish can eat treif, as we know, mamish. But whatever, a certain phase that they're not in war, mamish, troops can eat the mai, but the key here is that aniyim can eat the mai. And being that every person potentially can become a ani, halachic ani, either live in the modern cities today, you'll be, God, I'm just kidding. The Gemara says over there, a person can declare all his belongings hefker. If I'm not mistaken, it's 200 zuz or more that takes you out of the category of an ani. But if you don't even have 200 zuz, you're considered an ani, God forbid, and a person can be mafkid all his nachasim. So that's why, since in potential everyone is an ani, eating the mai is still going to be machayiv you to make zimah. Case number 2, says the Mishnah, now obviously again, if the truma was removed, when the Levi took off, received the meiser rishon, he properly removed meiser min ha-meiser, well, that's bona fide kosher food to be eaten. What would be the chiddush of the Mishnah? So explains over here the Bartanura, as quoted in the Charedim, what happened here. Now remember, guys, in contrast to what we will learn in the Seif of the Mishnah, it's good to review these dinim. Bekitzir, when we live in Eretz Yisrael, produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael, it's not where you live, but it's where the produce came out. Right, you have to separate trumas umaisis from when the product is considered a ready product. If it's grain that's being harvested to be sold, ready means that the pile of purified grains, right, underwent what we call the meruach. So there is a pile and it's smoothed out. The vendors go over there to the field to buy it. That's called that it's ready-made produce. You have a chiyuv to take off trumas umaisis. Now, once the chiyuv is chal, the order of the separation of trumas umaisis has to be followed. First, truma gedoyla. Truma gedoyla midoiraisa has no minimum share, but the chachamim gave for an average person 2%, 1 of 50. After which, or 2 from 100. After which, let's say you had 100, so you give 2 truma gedoyla. Now you have 98. From the 98, you give 10% to the lady, meiser rishon, 9.8. Right then, from what remains, you separate either in the first, second, fourth, fifth year of the 7-year of Shemitah cycle, you separate Meiser Sheni, and on the 3rd and the 6th year, you separate Meiser Ani. Okay. When the Levi receives his Meiser Rishon, he has to separate from it 10%, which is called Meiser, Trumas Meiser, or Meiser Minha Meiser, and that goes to the Kohen. What's going to happen? Now, this is the case of the Mishnah here in the Reisha, that before you even made the pile, when the grain is still in the stalks, still bishibalim. In other words, there was no chiyuv to tithe anything at all. For whatever reason, the owner first separated meiser rishon. So the Levi didn't get 9.8. The Levi got 10. He got 10% from the 100. And he went ahead and he gave 1 of that to the Kohen. He separated the meiser min ha-meiser. One might have thought that, hold on, there is still that 2% in the 10% that he received, right? Maybe the Levi has to separate that also and give it to the Kohen. Maybe the Levi has to separate what would have been the Truma Gedoyla from the 10, right? And Meiser Rishon. In this case, we say he didn't have to do so. Since he separated Meiser and Ha-Meiser, since the wrong order was when the grain was still bishibalim, there was no chiyuv of trumas or meiseres. All the Levi needed to do was to separate meiser and meiser. This is bona fide kosher food, and therefore there is a chiyuv of making a zimun. The next case in the Mishnah will be the third case is meiser sheni vehegdish shenivdu. If you have meiser sheni or hegdish that they were redeemed, and then now that they are redeemed, they went out to be chulin. So here again, if it was produce, if it was food, and people ate the meal, they're chayav l'bi mazam. What's the chiddush over here? Says the Charedim, 2 lines before the bottom. Yeah, every case has to have a novelty. The novelty here is that when the owner of the Meiser Sheni and or when the owner of the Hegdish is the one doing the redeeming, he has to also add a halachic fifth. And the case of the Mishnah is that he did not separate that Chomesh. Nevertheless, the Mishnah is telling you that the Chomesh is not ma'akev. The produce is really deconsecrated. Ubamela, as far as the chiyuv of zimun is concerned, the chayiv to be mizamin. Turning to the Ayin Aleph on the top, the next case. Hashamish sha'achal kezayis. Now, what's the case over here? What's the chiddush over here? You have 2 people that are eating, only 2 people. Bikvius. L'Rabbeinu Yoina, l'Rosh, however you define it. And these 2 people, right, the Hoicha people, they have a waiter waiting on them. He's standing there. And he's serving each one. He minhag of the shamish that while he's serving the people, he can also nibble on the food. He ended up eating a full kazayis. Obviously, if he didn't eat a kazayis, we see over here then you don't have three people that ate, according to the Mishnah over here. He did eat. You might have thought that since he ate standing, he should not be included. So the Mishnah is machadesh that no. Look inside the top Chaneda. The Mal, the Tema, the Kivish Shamash Eli Kvias. He's not fixed in a place. He's coming and going. He's going into the kitchen. He's going into the dining room. So then you would think, Komash Milan. No, that since that's the way the Shamash eats. That's the way the Shamash eats. It's not like the waiter would. The waiter had the right to eat, and that's the way he's considered part of the group, and you can do a zim. Okay. Now the Kuti. Now the Kuti is a whole different topic. The Kuti are a group of Goyim that were imported to the Holy Land by Sancheiriv when he exiled the tribes, the Asad Shvatim, and that was his MO all over. He conquered a place and he exiled the majority of its inhabitants. He imported foreigners. He created a lot of chaos. That was one of his tools that he used to remain in power. And these Kutim, wherever they lived primarily in Shomron, and lions, wild animals, which by nature stay away from populated areas. They had no fear of those Kutim, and they went into the cities and they were eating up the people, and they decided on their own. Why is that happening? Because they're not Yid, and they converted. In other words, they converted not L'Shem Shamayim, it's called Geidei Aroyos, but in their case, because they didn't want to die, they didn't want to be eaten by lions. That's the case of the Kutim. During the times of the Tanoim, there was a big debate whether they have the status of a Jew or not. I want you to know that in the earlier era of the Amoraim, once we discovered that they are still worshiping their Avodah Zarah, it doesn't matter what it is. So from then on, we all consider them to be Goyim. But when we have in the Mishnah a discussion about Kutim, you will know there's no consistency because there is a Machlokes Tanoim. Evidently, obviously, our Mishnah is of the group who holds that Kutim have a din of Yidden. And therefore, if the Kuti is the third, or even if the Kuti are two of the three, or all three of the three, if it's a Yid, so the Kuti also has to make Zimun, as we'll see in a moment. In contrast, a Nachri, a Goy, does not. So in all of these cases, Mizamin Aleihem. And now the Mishnah will make a contrast. I want you to know that just like in the Reisha, every case had a Chiddush. In the contrast, every case will also have a Chiddush. In other words, when the Mishnah says, Avol, but if they ate Tevel, now, if they ate Tevel, the Mishnah wouldn't tell you if they ate Tevel, they don't make Zimun. There's no novelty in that. Here again, the Bartanura, as quoted here in the Chanedim, each case will have a Chiddush. What will be the Chiddush over here? Chiddush over here will be that you had produce that grew in a non-perforated flower pot. It's called an otzitz she'ein nakuf. Something that grows in a perforated pot, midoiraisa, is considered to be something that was planted in the ground, because through the perforation, through the hole, as long as a small root can fit through that hole, as long as the otzitz is within a certain distance from the ground, it's deriving nourishment from the ground. Something is planted in a pot, right? Midin Torah, it wasn't planted in the Holy Land. Midin Torah, you don't have to tithe it. However, midrabanan, you do have to tithe. So you might have thought that since they ate food that midoiraisa is kosher, they're chayv to do zimun. That's the first case of the Mishnah in the Sefer, Komash Malan. No, that since midrabanan, you have to take off trumas u'maisers, and they didn't. So therefore, they cannot be mezamin. They ate not kosher. Next case is u'maiserishan shaloi nitru trumasi. So in contrast to the case of the Mishnah, here they made ruach. The owner already came to the point where there is an obligation to do the tithing. And again, the owner tithed it out of the right order. First, he gave maiserishan. So what the Levi received, even though the Levi gave maiser and ha-maiser, so he got 10, and he gave 1 to the Kohen. He never should have gotten 10. He only should have gotten 9.8. So, and here we do say that the Levi is chayiv first to take off that 0.2, and then to give 10% from what remains to the Kohen. And if he didn't do that, that's not kosher food. That's umay sedishon shaloi nitru trumasai. Next case is umay sheni behegdish shaloi nivdu. Now, again, what's the chiddush? If they didn't redeem it, of course they're not allowed to eat it. So says the Charedim, they redeemed it but they didn't do it halachically in a kosher way. And that, what would that do? Even though that in most areas in the Torah, whether you're giving money, whether you're giving anything that has its value, we're gonna apply the same rule, right? Isha niknes, right? Bekesef b'shava kesef. Actually, today we give kesef. We're not mekadosh b'shtar. Rav mangid alman de mekadosh b'bia, right? So the only option is do kedushin today with money. We don't give money. We give shava kesef. We give a ring. We give shava kesef. By hegdish and ma'aser sheni, since the Torah uses the words that sarta hakesef, and Chazal learn, it doesn't mean to bind the money in your hand. Literally, tzarta means to bind. But the tzarta is melashon surah, which means it has to be minted coins. So not only if a person gave a little piece of silver that has the value plus the chayvish, is it not going to affect the proper pidiyah, even if he gave asimonim? That means the coins were in middle of being made. They already have the form of a coin, but they don't yet have the imagery that they have to have, right? Non-properly minted coins, that's what happened over here. That it has value. You gave it in the right amount, but you're not allowed to do that, and therefore it did not affect the opinion. Next is if you have the shamash we said doesn't have to be sitting with them, but he ate less than a kazayis. Less than a kazayis is not good. And finally, anochri. Again, the question is, what's the chiddush? That a nochri cannot join zimun? Of course not. He's not obligated to keep the mitzvahs. He's obligated to keep his mitzvahs. Generally 7. Really, it's a lot more than 7 as the Rambam enumerates. But the Hanochri says, the Charedim, look inside at the end, we're speaking about someone that not only was accepted in a geared program, but if it's a man, he already did the bris milah. The only thing that's missing is the tefillah. He didn't go to the mikvah. So says the Mishnah, exactly. If he didn't do the tefillah, he is not a ger. And therefore, you cannot make zimun if you have to count them in. Beautiful Mishnah. Now let's move on to the Gemara. The Mishnah opens up by using the word shloisha sha'achlu ka'achas chayavin lizamin. Says the Gemara that over here, now the word hachi over here refers to Masech the Brachos, but not Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph, which is what we opened up today with. But Itma means here in this chapter in Halacha Dalet, in the 4th Mishnah, in Mishnah Dalet. And the Mishnah says these words, that once 3 people were eating in a way that they are obligated when they decide to make the benching, to do zimun, once the obligation of zimun goes into effect, they're not allowed to opt to leave or to separate themselves, to individuate themselves, thus removing the chiyuv of zimun. That's the words in the Mishnah. They cannot separate. If you have to wait for everyone to mend, you have to make the zimun together. You can't leave and take away zimun. Now, what is the question? So says the Gemara, and here our Mishnah writes, now there are 2 opposite ways of learning the Gemara. We're going to learn the Gemara. We're only going to learn as the Charedim explains it. The Charedim very powerfully says the Gemara is not asking a contradiction as others learn. Not a contradiction. The question is, it's superfluous. It's not needed. In other words, 1 is enough. You have to write that your 3 have to make a zimun and don't separate yourself. No. When you're chayiv, if you're chayiv to do something, you got to do it. If you have to do it, of course you can't do something that will get you out of the obligation. Then you're not going to be fulfilling your obligation. So it's not necessary. That's the way the Gemara is asking the question. So Shmuel answers the Gemara. Shmuel Amar Kan. Now, Kan betchila, the Kan besoiv. Now, guys, before we determine where is the tchila, is tchila halacha aleph or halacha dalet? Just to know one thing will be consistent. In the soif, whichever statement, what are the 2 statements? There's a statement in later in the 4th Mishnah, Ein Rishoyim Lachalik. There's another statement, which is here, that Chayavin Lizamin. One of them will be Tchila, one of them will be soif. We'll see how machlekes which one is which. Don't worry, it's a very easy Gemara. There's one thing that you have to just stay with. Whichever one is the soif has no chiddush. The soif has no novelty. The tchila has the novelty. As we'll see in other words, if the Mishnah only would have written the soif, you would not have known something. The Mishnah writes, you think it's superfluous? No. The one that we're going to call tchila needed to be written because now you'll know something that you would not have known. So let's go inside. Kam b'tchila, kam b'soif. Now, which Mishnah is the Tchila, which Mishnah is the Soif? So today, Amiroyin had a dispute in understanding what Shmuel is saying. Chad Amar, that Nasnu Da'as Lechoil, Zeo Batchila. So what would that mean? At the beginning, again, guys, remember, the beginning is where there is a Chiddush. Nasnu Da'as Lecho Zeo Batchila would mean what happens. Now, I know that we learned to Rabbeinu Yoina, and I know we learned to Rosh. We don't have to repeat it right now. What I'm going to say now does not contradict any of that. Okay? What the Gemara is saying is like this. What happens if three people did not even begin the meal? But they had it in their da'as, they had it in their kavana to go eat together. So the chiddush of the Mishnah, so to say, so superficially repeating the same din is by telling you that even if only nasnu das lechol, then they already have to stick it out and they have to eat together and make the zimun. And that's not something you would have known had the Mishnah only written it one time. Basoif means that if they ate a kazayis already, if three people actually ate a kazayis together, and then now there's a chiyuv lezamen. Of course, if there's already a chiyuv lezamen, we know on our own that ain't rishoyin lecholik, because you're chayiv to be mezamen. The chiddush, again, the chiddush is the soif, is that even if they didn't sit already, they didn't sit yet, but they had in mind to eat together, boom, they're already chayiv to eat and therefore to make the zimun. Now that's one way of understanding what Shmuel is saying. But the other one holds, no. You're going too far back. Just having intent to eat together is not enough to say now you have to do it and now you have to do a zim. That the betchila, the chiddush is in the tchila. That ochlu kazayis, if they only ate a kazayis, they began to eat together. That's called the tchila. Turning to daf ayin aleph amid beis, gomru achilason zo basoif. So let's go again. If the Mishnah only would have written it once, I would have thought that what? That once people already finished the meal, now they're going to go bench. One of the group cannot say, "Oh, I'm gonna go over there. I'm gonna go to another place." You can't do that because now you're up to the zimun. One might have thought that even though they sat and they sat down together, they already all ate a kazayis, but they didn't eat a meal yet. They're not even thinking about benching. Don't forget that zimun is inviting others to bench. They're not dreaming about benching yet. One would have thought that since if one person says, you know what, I want to bench now, he would be allowed to do so. Verstehst? In other words, the Mishnah writes something from both angles. You're chayiv to be mezamen, that you can't be mechalek, to add something, to add the tchila. Question is, how far in the beginning are you already mechayiv? Is there a chiyuv to do zimun ad kedei kach that ain't a shoyim mechalek? That's the machlekes Amoraim.
Rabbi,
yes.
If according to the first opinion, if me and you and Kayvon said, "Hey, let's eat a kazayis together," and you guys said, "Yeah, let's do it," boom, that's called we're now obligated in a zimun.
Yep.
Rabbi, is it about the saying that let's eat a kazayis together, or is it at the point that you eat a kazayis? That's once you become at a point where you're no longer able to mechalek.
So let's go back. I know there's different ways of learning that. In other words, let me just speak out what both Danny and David are really coming to, where I got tripped up. If people decide to eat, are you telling me that one guy has to eat? They all have to eat? That we're not saying. You can't say that. Well, just because I decided to have a meal, what happens if I didn't have a meal? The das, let's go and look, guys, go back to Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. Let's look inside the second to last charedim of the Amud. It's probably around 10 lines before the bottom of the Amud. Nasnu datem lechol miyad, af al pi shachar kach ochel kol echad la'atzmoi. Here's what happened. Now, you see, David, this is according to the way he learns. That three people decided to eat together. They ended up all three eating, but they didn't eat together. Now, everyone is chayiv to bench now. So one Amoida's understanding what Shmuel was saying is, listen to this, is that since before eating, they had in mind to eat together, doesn't contradict the Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rosh at all, because they all ate. The only thing is that when they ate, they didn't eat in the same location. They are already through their initial da'as so mekushed one to the other that now they're considered that they are a group. And now that when they're benching, they have to join together. That's what the Charedim says. Was if 3 people had in mind to eat and only 2 people ate, of course there's no zimun. No one did anything wrong. Just because I decided to eat, that doesn't bind me to eat. They didn't make a neder to eat. But here I ate. Okay. Because since they had in mind in the beginning to eat together, so to say, they were obligated in a mitzvah. And once you're obligated in a mitzvah, you got to go and fill it out. So that's the way we're going to learn the pshat and the gemara. That answers both of your comments. Okay. Now we're coming to a new topic. The new topic is that now we know halacha l'maisa because we practice this. Zimun is only if there's 3 people. 2 people, we don't do zimun. Now we're going to see, not so simple. I know the Mishnah says that one can learn pshat in the Mishnah that shloshlu sha'achlu they're chayiv, shnayim sha'achlu reshoyin. Maybe they could. Guys, one guy cannot do zimun because the whole part of zimun is one guy's inviting the other, and he's saying, "Let us go bench." But 2, you have one, you have the other. In Brazil, there was one of those cities 3 hours away out of São Paulo. I remember. I think I forgot the name of the place. We once made a hachnasa sefer Torah there. These guys, these are Yidden, that it's a miracle that they're still Jewish. I don't know how they're Jewish. And one local over there, he bought 2 homes, one for him, one for the shul. There's no minyan there. There's nothing there. And he was explaining to me that in that place, you know how you say Kaddish? We need 2 people. Because he understood. One guy says, one guy answers Amen. And he said it so, to me was the kite. I'll never forget that. This guy was a professor in a psychology there. He knew you needed to be. He says, there's no million of Jews in this village. No, maybe 2 people is enough. So let's go. So Rab Abba b'shem Rab Chuna. Now look how many Amoraim. We're going to count them. Rab Abba in the name of Rab Chuna. And Rab Ze'era in the name of Abba bar Yirmiyah. All of these Amoraim are saying that Shloisha Chayva. Indeed, when the Mishnah says Shloshu Sha'achlu Ka'echad, it only means to say that if you have 3 or more, now you're chayiv to do zimun. Shnayim is not chayiv, but not chayiv doesn't mean that they may not. No, rishus. If they want, they can do a zimun. 2 people can make a zimun. However,
this means 2 people that ate together without a 3rd person there.
Correct, David. Wow. Mamish. No, I know, we're learning Gemara. We're not learning Shulchan Aruch. So listen, guys, 4 Amoraim are saying that, that you can do a zimun. You're not chai, but you could. 1 second. Now, one of these 4 is Rab Ze'era, right? The second group, Rab Ze'era. Now, Rab Ze'era went and said this in front of Rabbi Yassa. Oh, and Rabbi Yassa argued, Amalei, Ani Eli Ela Mishnah. I only have the words of the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Shloisha sha'achlu ki'achas is chayavin lezamin. So what the Haredim is understanding, what Rabbi Yassa is counter-arguing, if what you are saying is correct, the Mishnah would have to add shnayim reshus. The Mishnah cannot write shloshlu sha'achlu chayavin lezamin and leave it open-ended. The fact, that's the way Rabbi Yassa understood. The fact the Mishnah didn't say berachel b'chaktana, that shnayim reshus means shnayim is not even reshus. 2 people cannot do zim. Okay, machlokes. Now the Gemara says that I want you to know b'lashon of a yeshiva l'shita sayu rabbanon dahacha. That rabbanon over here refers to the ones in Eretz Yisrael. This refers to Rabbi Yassa. Is kedatoin. Rabbi Yassa is the one that says that 2 may not even optionally. They followed the same concept that they also argued with others in another topic. We'll see by Sanhedrin. So they go l'shitosayu, and the Rabbanon the Asam is the 4th is Rab Abba b'shem Rab Chuna and Rab Ze'era b'shem Rab Yirmiyah, that they are kidatoin. They follow the opinion l'shitosayu of the Chachmei of Bavel, which is where laws, basic laws in a Beis Din. And as we learned, that Shmuel Amar, even though the Mishnah in Sanhedrin says that that there are 3, the minimum Beis Din is 3. Like you have a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that al tadin yechidi. Now really you have almost like a contradiction, because al tadin yechidi implies that if you're not sitting all by yourself, Right? The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Ela Echad. Only God can sit in judgment by himself. Okay? What happens if there are two people? The Mishnah says three people. So some people hold that Shnayim Shadanu, and by the way, there it doesn't mean, it means B'di'evet. That if de facto they did adjudicate a case, B'di'evet, dinam din, their ruling, their decision is halachically binding. It's valid because they did give up Sagdin. Elama, El Shunikra based on Chatzuf. A chutzpah that they didn't have to read. Now, where's Shmuel? Shmuel is from Bavel. Kiyadua, not Avdah. Right? So it goes together. So Rab Abba and Avhuna and Avzeira, all of these, yeah, they follow, just like they learned Pshat in the Mishnah and Sanhedrin, that even though the Mishnah says three doesn't exclude a possibility on some level, whether it is Shus, whether it be the Evid of two. So they learned the same thing over here. However, Rabbi Yechanan, as we know, Rabbi Yechanan is from Eretz Yisrael, as is his brother-in-law, the Rav Shimon ben Lakish. No, afilu shnayim shadanu ein dinam din. So that's going to be like, in other words, the Lashita Sayu is not Rabbi Yasa mit Rabbi Yasa, but it's the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael versus Chachmei Bavel that they understood. They learned to have the same Derech HaLimud. How great is that?
Rabbi, the two parties have to agree for a two-court judge to take a case.
So Kavan is pointing out something which is interesting, and that is that why did even the two parties sit there? The fact that they sat there, you can argue, that kiblu alayu.
It was already.
That's the toisvis that some groups make famous. And how did the Vaida be a shayfetis when halachically you can't be mamana a woman as a shayfet because kiblu alayu. So if kiblu alayu, what's wrong with two? So I want you to know the answer to your question, Kevan, and that's something which is very much negated to Bati Dinim today. Most Bati Dinim today, they serve as mediators, binding arbitrators. Now, there's a very big difference between arbitration versus absagdin. And if two people accept binding arbitration, Kevan, halachically, they're bound by it. Because when it comes to Dinei Mamanis, any agreement is valid. I can decide to give you money, even though I don't owe it to you. But if the two litigants did not accept them as binding arbitration, they didn't know. They thought that two can be a court. They didn't know. It must be that. And so that's the machlokes. Let's go back. Rav Chuna Amar, we know Rav Chuna is Rav Chuna, that shloisha she'achlu zeh b'fnei atzmai v'zeh b'fnei atzmai. They were eating all by themselves. And then they joined together. So the din is that mizamnin. Now this does not jive, not with the Rabbeinu Yoino, not with the Rosh that we learned at the end of last class. That you can look it up over there in the Charedim and the Bartanur in the beginning. This, but we don't pass in this way. But so is their shita. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Let's go to the Pnei Moshe a little bit. 4 lines under the Gemara. 4 into the widest of lines. Shloishu sha'achlu zeh b'fnei atzmai v'chulei v'nesarvu, says the Pnei Moshe Koleim. Shkol echad ma'ashloishu sha'achlu b'chabura achas. Okay, I'm sorry. This is a whole new case. Here we go. They're very important. What happened was like this, guys. Now it goes with Rabbi Leon. Nothing contradicts over here. You had 3 groups of people. 3 groups of people. Every group had 3 people, which means that every group that ate, every person there is chayiv to do zimah. Really, they were not supposed to leave their group, but they did. From every group, 1 left, and now they made another group. That's what the Charedim is saying. Each one of them already came from a chabura. As Rab Chizda will explain the case of Rab Chuna. That's what Rab Chuna is saying. So in other words, normally we don't say that. Normally, like the Rosh, they didn't begin together. They just get together for benching. Of course, they're not allowed to make zim. That's the whole beginning Mishnah. The Mishnah says shloishu sha'achlu ka'achas. They did not eat ka'achas. Chiddush of Rav Chuna is that since they ate ka'achas with another group, so each one is chayiv to be mezamin. Now, if one guy wrongfully separated himself and he's by himself, he cannot do zim. But now that you have 3 people, each one has on them a chiyuv to do zimun. They make zimun together. Says Rav Chizda.
They're all in the same location?
Whatever. Okay, but I ate we're all in LA because for me to go to a new place, too much time passed when the food was digested. I can't bench at all. They all have to bench. They all came from a group that was machayiv each one to bench with the zimun. They did not do the right thing by leaving, but they left. In the case where they still have to make birchas hamazon, you have to work out all those details because many times when it comes today to benching, if I left my location, I cannot bench in the new location. You have to work that out. But in the cases where each one has to bench, they make the zimun. And Abchiz da Amar, vehein shabau mishloisha chaburais. That's what we just said. In other words, Rabbi Chizda adds, it must be that each one was already obligated to do zimun. And that's why they're still chayiv now that they're three together. And now you have words. And now you have words that are a big machlokes how to learn the next words. Again, we're going to follow the shita of the charedim, how to learn the next words. And that is al date, and we're going to add the afilu, the Rab Ze'eda v'chavrusei. That even though, guys, listen to what he's saying. Even though we just had a machlokes whether two people are rishoi to do zimun, rishoi, and the group of Rab Ze'eda, which are the Chachmei Bavel, they are of the opinion that two people are allowed to do zimun. Even that group will hold that in the case here of Rab Chuna, and Rab Chuna is also part of that group. When do we say that these three people ate in a prior group? Now that they are together, they have to make a zimun? Only when they came from a group of three. In other words, one might have thought that according to the group of Amoraim that hold, that two people are to show you to make zimun. Think about this, guys. What happens if there were three groups? Every group was only of two. Every group was only of two. And one person from every group now went to this new location, and now they're benching. You would think maybe according to those Amoraim, since two Rishoi, optionally, they can make zimun. No. That when Abchizda is saying that they came from three groups, Lokula Alma, for you to be able to make a zimun, you needed to be chayiv to make a zimun. Chayiv to make a zimun means that you came from a group of three. So is the way we're going to learn the Gemara. Other Rishonim, not over here, but in the Bavli, they mamish say the opposite. They say the opposite, but we're not going to get. They say that according to those who hold that if you have two people, Rishoi, even when there was two, but we're not going to learn that way. We're going to say no matter your opinion whether two people are allowed to do zimun, this halacha of Rab Chuna is only if there was a chiyuv of doing zimun, which is only if there was three prior. All right. Now we're going to make a jump.
At a wedding, and we're all at different tables, and there's three at each of those tables. But then, for whatever reason, those zimuns break up. But then we can combine and make our own zimun because we all had the obligation.
I think, first of all, I fully understand what you're saying, Danny. I think it's not a good example. And we spoke about the Shabbos when we made the review. We went back to the Charedim that spoke about the Bris and the Balabasas and Mashamish. What happens if nowadays by a wedding, the Balei Simcha, as we do now, there's a party planner. They actually sit down and eat. They're not the Mashamshim. In other words, everyone in that room is one group. I think by wedding it's everyone. We're a group of 800 people. We are one group. And I'm benching in the hall. I don't think that's the case of here. Here they push it left. They left the group. They came from three different weddings. I think that's what happened there. And they went to Hashem Abrachas.
Maybe in a Pesach program in the dining room where every table is the own family, right? So they're not.
That's a much better example. That's good. Okay, here you have separateness. They're not ka'achas. Very good. Yeah, very good.
Got it. Okay.
Now, 1 second. Now, we are very familiar with the next line with the way of thinking. We're going to be mamish medama milsa that externally have no connection one with the other. And to say bekitzer, that when it comes to the koyach of sprinkling someone with the mechatos, to be matayed him, Chazal learn that since we have by the leaving of Mitzrayim the words agudas ezoif, I know there it's about the dam, whatever. We learned that whenever you're using the hissa to sprinkle on the person who was tummy b'tmei meis, you have to take not one stalk, you have to have a bundle of 3 stalks, minimally 3, for it to be considered a bundle. So now, Rabbi Yoina al Haddad Rab Chuna, similar. Or even better, you can say based on that law. He said like this, that the same thing. That you had, see guys, there's two steps of the sprinkling. There's the tvila, the dipping it into the mechatos, and then there is the sprinkling. So what happens if I dip 3 stalks, but now I removed one? I can't sprinkle with it. But what happens if I dip 3, one group, then I dipped another group of 3, then I dipped a third group of 3, and from each group I took 1 stalk, and now I have 3. So even though they were not toiveled together, you can do the hazoya, because since they were ready, they were mukhshar for the hazoya, you can separate them and reconnect them, and you don't lose the chiyuv, you don't lose that power, that potency, right? You see the comparison that even though v'nesarvu, so the din is based on abchuna mazeh bohem, and here again. And again, even al date that Abzeeda v'chavru say that that 2 optionally can do the zimun. Here it has to be 3. How great is this comparison? In other words, the same thing. 3. Once the potency was chal because you did the tefillah with the 3. Now you separated 1, it's not valid, but if you combine it with another and with another, they all can combine together. And the Gemara is saying, I know we're going to have to go over, and I know that it's already 7:01. So the Gemara is asking, in Tamar, and if you're going to challenge me, how can you compare these 2 cases together? So the answer is we do. Just to read the words, we see that the Chachamim, they were makayim a comparison from the dinim of sukkah to the dinim of tit hanorik. When it comes to a very liquidy mud being poured in a mikvah, we'll continue that tomorrow. That just like they made up a jump from a din of a hilchas mikvah to hilchas sukkah, yes, I can learn the din of the ezoif from the din of zimun, God willing, to be continued.
By the way, Rabbi.
Yes.
It reminds me also of hilchas nizakin, that we just learned in the Rambam and also in Bava
yes,
Kama, where a cow is considered a muad if it does the 15th of the month and then the 16th of the month and the 17th.
Mamish by Vesses. Very good.
Compares it to Nida, which is such a
to Vesses
comparison, but it's like the same idea.
Yes, very good.